Hello all you freedom-loving people. Welcome to another episode of Front Page International. I'm your host, Scott Cameron Goulet. The UK's vaccine minister went back on his promise of not implementing a vaccine passport. Meanwhile, nearly 6,000 Greek hospital workers were suspended for not getting vaccines. Australia is testing out a quarantine app with facial recognition and is building a quarantine concentration camp. Does this sound like a free country to you? Russian cosmonauts have discovered new cracks in the International Space Station. Officials warn there could be an avalanche of broken equipment after 2025. And finally, a touching story of a mother making a tough choice, but it was the right decision. What would you do if doctors suggested that you abort your unborn child 5 times? Okay, let's get into it. Big Brother Watch published a report on September 5th stating that free speech online is declining. The UK watchdog warned that the UK government's proposed law for tackling online abuse, entitled the Online Safety Bill, would only worsen the problem. The draft bill aims to protect adults and children from both legal and illegal harms when they are online. It would empower the broadcast regulator Ofcom to fine and even block tech companies for violating the rules. Critics and supporters alike have described it as the most ambitious attempt to regulate the internet in the free world. Although the government has insisted that the new laws have sufficient free speech safeguards and that they wouldn't police legal content that is posted by adults, Mark Johnson, the legal and policy officer at Big Brother Watch, said in a statement, "The online safety bill will only make this worse and pose a greater threat to freedom of speech in the UK than any other law in living memory." He said, "The bill does absolutely nothing to help police deal with real crime online, but rather focuses on ordinary people's conversations." Many free speech organizations have also addressed their concerns about the category of legal but harmful content. The report by Big Brother Watch also criticized the government's current counter-disinformation cell, which is part of the National Cybersecurity Centre's operations to tackle online misinformation. According to the report, the task force scours social media platforms and flags concerns with the platforms. Johnson said in a separate statement, "This backroom relationship between the government and the platforms is what we can expect to see in the future. The government's proposed online safety bill will be the final result of this power convergence, where corporate terms and conditions and domestic law will be identical, and the platform's power will be consolidated by state legitimacy. As UK citizens' civil liberties are slowly taken away, it was also confirmed on September 5th that the UK government will proceed with plans to mandate COVID-19 vaccine passports for nightclubs and large venues. In January, the UK vaccines minister, Nadhim Zahawi, wrote on Twitter that the government has no plans to introduce vaccine passports. And then later, he said that such passports would be discriminatory. When questioned on Twitter in January, "Can we hold you to this?" Zahawi replied, "Yes, you can." However, he announced in an interview with the BBC that the government would seek to impose the system by the end of September. The Electronic Freedom Foundation, in an article, described a number of missteps that were made by governments and by private entities that are trying to roll out vaccine passports. The group said that many governments have taken the wrong path, and the group warned it could get worse, adding that imposing such systems on the world will lock out hundreds of millions of people from being able to work or even travel. The group also surmised that vaccines should be a tool to reopen doors. Digital vaccine passports, as we've seen them deployed so far, are far more likely to slam them shut. It's very possible that the UK citizens will take to the streets and protest against vaccine passports, just like their neighbors in France. On September 4th, thousands of French citizens demonstrated in several cities for an 8th straight weekend. Protesters continue to demonstrate against the country's COVID-19 vaccine passport system, which is required in order to enter most public areas, including stadiums, cafes, restaurants, and gyms. The Health Pass, which was passed by the French Parliament weeks ago, mandates that an individual must be vaccinated, have a recent negative COVID-19 test, or prove they have fully recovered from the virus. Another law that is slated to go into effect this month will require all healthcare workers to get the vaccine. France's Ministry of Interior confirmed to news outlets over the weekend that about 140,000 people took part in demonstrations over the weekend. A week ago, about 170,000 people protested. Under the current vaccine passport law, only adults are eligible to get the jab. However, that will soon change as all children ages 12 and above will be allowed to get vaccinated on September 30th. A Parisian woman said to Ouest France, "We will always say no to the sanitary pass. We're not sheep." She added, "No to discrimination, no to bullying, freedom." Similar vaccine passports were introduced in other European nations, including Italy, Switzerland, Germany, and others, which also drew massive demonstrations. In Greece, the Greek Ministry of Health has revealed that almost 6,000 suspensions have been handed out to hospital workers who are either not fully vaccinated or who declined the COVID vaccine. Greece now requires all healthcare workers to have at least one COVID shot, despite appeals from healthcare workers to reject the mandatory vaccine. On September 2nd, the Greek government announced it would be giving healthcare workers who had been suspended a second chance to get the first shot of the coronavirus vaccine. The amendment will allow healthcare workers to return to work if they take the jab in the coming days. Meanwhile, hundreds of healthcare workers staged a 5-hour protest in Athens and other Greek cities. According to a labor union official, as many as 10,000 hospital workers could face suspension for not taking the vaccine. This could impact the ability of hospitals to keep up with incoming patients and to give adequate and timely treatment. This past Sunday, September 5th, was Australian Father's Day. The regular celebration of sitting together at the dinner table, enjoying family time, seems impossible under COVID restrictions of locked state borders, but nothing can stop the Aussies from expressing their love of family. Families gathered at the border, hugging and sharing meals over the plastic barricades, which extended for miles and miles along the border. Queensland shut its border to neighbouring New South Wales in July after a wave of COVID cases in Sydney. Some people at the border said that this is the first time seeing the newborn babies in their family since they could only make video calls to see the babies during the lockdown. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Scott Morrison enjoyed Father's Day as usual. Morrison flew back home from Canberra to Sydney on Saturday afternoon and returned on Monday. A government spokesman said that the Prime Minister had been approved to return to Canberra, crossing border lines under conditions set out by the local health department. Members of Parliament are classified as essential workers and are able to travel for essential work. Morrison said that he had gone home like all other members of Parliament and that MPs, ministers, and the leader of the opposition would get similar treatment if they needed to come back to Canberra. He also said the exemption that applied to parliamentarians also applied to all essential workers. Australian Capital Territory's Chief Health Officer, Karen Coleman, refused to comment on Morrison's specific case, but she said, as a public health official, it was not up to her to judge the essentiality of work. Morrison received intense backlash for being able to visit his family, while the majority of people are not allowed to. However, this favoritism cannot compare to the scale of Australia's next move in pandemic restrictions. But before we continue, I hope you're liking our new show, Front Page International. Every week, we will bring you the most important world news updates. Please help us to spread the word about this new channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing this video. And if you want to help Front Page grow, please consider supporting us by donating to our donor box. The link is in the description below. We here at Front Page thank you for your support. Okay, let's get back into it. The South Australian government unveiled that they are testing a new app which uses geolocation and facial recognition technology to ensure residents are complying with COVID-19 home quarantine orders. All South Australians who are ordered to quarantine must download and use the app. The new app, Home Quarantine SA, contacts people at random and asks them to provide proof of their location within 15 minutes. Citizens then share their location with the government or provide live face check-ins to confirm that they are at their registered quarantine address, according to the app's description. According to the app's frequently asked questions, individuals who miss their geolocation check-ins will receive a follow-up phone call where they will have to discuss why they missed their notification, and if they miss that, a compliance officer may visit their home. South Australia Premier Stephen Marshall said, "We don't tell them how often or when. On a random basis, they have to reply within 15 minutes. Under South Australia's current COVID-19 guidelines, health officials and law enforcement officers can direct citizens to quarantine in their homes or in quarantine hotels for 14 days. People who break quarantine face up to $1,000 fines. The app pilot program began August 23rd and contains 50 people, but Marshall plans on a statewide adoption. The Western Australian government is also using a similar app known as G2G now to monitor quarantine, but according to the app's frequently asked questions, the use of the app is voluntary except for individuals traveling from a high-risk jurisdiction. But Australia's not satisfied with only a tracking app. The Queensland government is reportedly establishing a quarantine camp outside of the city of Brisbane to, in their words, keep the Delta variant out. Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk said in a statement,
"We want to keep you safe, and the best way to keep you safe and to keep Delta out of Queensland is to build as quickly as possible a regional quarantine facility."
By the end of the year, the new COVID-19 quarantine facility should have 500 beds available, with a total of 1,000 beds accessible by the end of the first quarter of 2022. The property, which is 80 miles from the state capital Brisbane, has already begun construction. The pace of the government's pushing telescreens, like in George Orwell's 1984, and concentration camps in a free country under the name of public safety is terrifying. Citizens are forbidden from international and interstate traveling without an exemption from the government. Tens of thousands of citizens abroad are stranded and can't come home. People are forced to wear masks and social distance when they're outdoors. And the military is deployed to enforce these rules, ban protests, and arrest and fine dissenters. The biggest fear is clearly not the virus itself. September 5th marked 1,000 days since the two Michaels, Canadians Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, were arbitrarily detained in China. Canadian Foreign Minister Marc Garneau condemned their detention. He said, "This must stop. They must come home." Garneau joined fellow Canadians in Ottawa for the 7,000 Steps for Freedom March to call for the release of the two Michaels. 7,000 steps represents the number of steps Michael Kovrig walks each day in his small prison cell to ensure a necessary amount of exercise. Kovrig told his wife in a letter that he still remains strong in spirit and is doing everything he can to keep himself healthy mentally and physically. Kovrig's wife said in an interview,
"Canadians and political leaders across the board are united in the fact that this is unjust, that this is arbitrary, and that we must bring them home."
She's hoping that the new government's priority is to get the Canadians released once the election is over. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs responded on Monday by accusing Canada of being hypocritical and interfering with China's judicial sovereignty. We've talked about how the two Michaels are being used as bargaining chips for Huawei's executive Meng Wanzhou's extradition case in a previous episode. I've put the link in the description below. Russian cosmonauts have discovered new cracks in a segment of the International Space Station, the ISS, with fears that they could widen. Chief Engineer Vladimir Zolovyov from the Rocket and Space Corporation Energia told Russia's state-run news agency, RIA, that superficial fissures have been found in some places on the Zarya module. He said this is bad and suggests that the fissures will begin to spread over time. A NASA spokesperson told the Daily Mail there are currently no issues impacting crew or normal International Space Station operations, and no new potential leak sites have been identified. Russia and the United States jointly launched the ISS in 1998, which at the time was hailed as a significant effort to reconstruct tensions between the former Cold War rivals. However, Russian space officials have recently said that much of the International Space Station's equipment is starting to age and have warned there could be an avalanche of broken equipment after 2025. Roscosmos, Russia's space agency, reported last month that an air leak caused a drop in pressure in the living quarters for crew members on the ISS. Then, a software glitch and a possible lapse in human attention were to blame for throwing the ISS out of control. Also, the jet thrusters on the Russian research module Nauka inadvertently reignited a few hours after it had docked, causing the entire orbital outpost to pitch out of its normal flight position with 7 crew members aboard. Earlier this year, Russian officials have said that Russia will withdraw from the ISS by 2025 and is now working on its own space station. Deputy Prime Minister Yuri Borisov told state television in April, "We can't risk the lives of our cosmonauts. The situation that today is connected to the structure and the metal getting old. It can lead to irreversible consequences, to catastrophe. We mustn't let that happen." Borisov's comments were made a few days after Joe Biden unleashed a wide array of sanctions on Russia, including to its sovereign debt market over alleged cyber attacks, elections interference, and military incursions near Ukraine. A woman who was told 5 times that she should abort her son is now sending him off to his first day of school. Sammy Bates, who already had 2 children, Leah and Benji, now 11 and 8, discovered she was pregnant by a happy accident in the autumn of 2016. Before Davy was born, doctors told his parents that their son stood little chance of survival and even advised them to terminate the pregnancy 5 times. Sammy said, "It was appointments and scans every 3 weeks, almost invariably with doctors advising us to end the pregnancy. At the 20-week and the 28-week scans, the doctors noticed severe abnormalities with Davy's development. They diagnosed congenital diaphragmatic hernia, CDH, where a hole in the diaphragm allows the intestines and stomach to enter the chest cavity, which stops the lungs from developing properly. The doctors told Sammy and her husband Paul that their baby had just a 15% chance of survival and strongly advised them to have an abortion again and again. It was as severe a case of CDH as the doctors had ever seen, according to Sammy. It just seemed impossible he could survive outside my womb, but we couldn't live with ourselves if we didn't at least give him a chance." So the couple insisted on going ahead with the pregnancy. On July 18, 2017, Davy Bates was born at a healthy 5 pounds and 15 ounces. He was put straight on a ventilator and within hours was on the operating table. Medics spent 4 hours repositioning Davy's organs, telling his parents that he had a 50-50 chance of survival. But the surgery went well, and within days, Davy was off the ventilator. He was home 3 weeks later, and he has never looked back. In the early days, the couple was provided with accommodations at the hospital by the Sick Children's Trust. The Bates say that they will forever be indebted to the charity for its help. Davy is now a happy and healthy 4-year-old boy. This week, Davy will walk through the gates of his primary school for the first time after a very long road. Sammy affirmed, "I'll be the proudest mom on earth when I wave him off at the school gates." She said, "With everything he has been through, it's a day we thought may never happen. I'm not sure I'll be able to hold it together." I want to congratulate the Bates family for having the courage to not listen to the doctors, for doing what's right, and for giving Davy a chance to live his own life. Isn't this what life is all about? Doing the right thing, even though it's difficult and against the grain. Okay, this is our show for today. Thank you for watching our new show, Front Page International. Please help us to spread the word by liking, subscribing, and sharing this video, because everybody deserves to know the truth. Again, thank you for watching Front Page International. We will see you next time.